more than 4,000 years ago, before the Bible, before Homer, there was a story carved in stone, lost in time, and rescued from the dust of oblivion. Beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, in the ruins of a forgotten king's palace, thousands of clay tablets lay in silence. But among them, 7 held a secret. An epic that dared to challenge the god and fate itself. The name of the king was Gilgamesh, half human, half divine. Consumed by glory and by the fear of death, together with his faithful companion, he journeyed to the ends of the world in search of the one thing no one has ever achieved: immortality. Was it just a myth, or a true echo from the deepest corners of the human soul? The oldest story ever told is about to awaken. In the mid-19th century, science opened a window into our past, into the legacy of ancestors who laid the foundations of our civilization. Interest in the Sumerians. What was very likely the oldest human civilization was definitively consolidated. In the 1830s, British soldier Henry Rawlinson achieved the impossible. He deciphered the writing that this ancient people had gifted to the world. Thanks to the inscriptions of Utnapishtim carved high into a sheer Iranian cliff, the linguist was able to translate the mysterious The deciphering of cuneiform writing had been completed. For the first time in history, we could understand what those ancestral writings, previously silent and unintelligible, were telling us about the cradle of civilization. The past of the Sumerian people suddenly became meaningful. A lost world began to speak again. Hundreds of expeditions arrived in the lands of Uruk, the birthplace of the ancient Mesopotamian civilizations. For decades, archaeologists uncovered texts, temples, and treasures once belonging to this mysterious culture. And then, everything led to a moment. The spring of 1872. Near Mosul, in northern Iraq, a team of archaeologists was sent to uncover the secrets buried within the ancient city of Nineveh. Once the glorious capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a city mentioned in the Bible, a city that they believed still had many stories to tell. Led by Hermust Rassam and Austin Henry Laird, the expedition aimed to recover the lost memories of a forgotten world veiled by the sands of time. And then it happened. Digging through the ruins, they made a discovery unlike any other. They had found the palace of Ashurbanipal, the last great king of Assyria. For the first time in thousands of years, human footsteps echoed through the halls where royalty once walked. A palace that dated back to the 7th century BC, an astonishing find on its own. But it wasn't the only one. Inside the ruins, they discovered a hidden corridor. A path that led through blocked rooms and winding hallways, Pushing through the darkness, the archaeologists reached a chamber that would change history forever. The Palace Library, a royal archive, untouched for centuries, filled with thousands of artifacts. Thousands of cuneiform tablets, preserved inside the oldest known library in the world. The stories of humanity's first civilization revealed before their eyes. The library of Ashurbanipal was in surprisingly good condition. More than 15,000 clay tablets, each inscribed with ancient knowledge, waited like sleeping giants in the shadows, a priceless gift from our ancestors, finally brought into the light. And now, it was time to read them. To discover what had waited patiently in the dark. At the request of the British Museum, the task of translation was given to George Smith, an English Assyriologist and expert in the lost language of the Sumerians. For months, he immersed himself in the texts, day after day decoding the words of kings and scholars. He unveiled the voice of an ancient world. The tablets contained an astonishing range of texts. Primitive scientific treatises, royal letters, sacred hymns. But then, something happened. Something that would change everything. Among the many tablets, there were 7 that stood apart. 7 clay tablets that told a myth. A story unlike any ever found. From the very beginning, it was recognized as the oldest known literary work in human history. George Smith had discovered the Epic of Gilgamesh. 5 poetic fragments written around 2100 BC, telling the tale of a powerful king who, in his desperate search for immortality, ventured to the very ends of the earth. Was it just a myth, or a memory carved in clay that had waited over 4,000 years to be heard again? Seven clay tablets on which a myth was recorded. From the very beginning, it was treated as the oldest literary work in history. Smith had discovered the Epic of Gilgamesh. 5 poems written around 2100 BC, which told the story of a king who, in search of immortality, traveled to the ends of the earth. He met a wise man named Utnapishtim and his wife, the only survivors of a cataclysm, to whom the gods had granted the very gift Gilgamesh longed for: eternal life. Fascinated by the myth, he saw how the tablets were telling a story about a world drowned by a flood, and a man who, by building a ship, saved the fate of humanity. It seemed that the Sumerians were speaking of the Great Flood and Noah's Ark 2,000 years before it appeared in the Bible. He had something unique in his hands. After completing the translation on December 3rd, 1872, Smith read the writings before the members of the Society of Biblical Archaeology, leaving all the attendees deeply astonished, especially by the Epic of Gilgamesh. Unfortunately, the story was incomplete. Fragments were missing from a work then, as some said, could shake the very foundations of the Christian religion. Smith was entrusted with the mission of finding the missing fragments of that epic. They had to place the final jewel on the crown of the king's tale. With new excavations in the lands of Uruk, they uncovered lost tablets of the epic that had gone unnoticed in the first expedition. But they found much more than just the continuation of the myth. In some fragments, Smith saw references to deities from the Sumerian pantheon who lived in the heavens, watching over the fate of humanity. The writings described a group of divine beings, descendants of a god named Anu, whom that civilization revered above all. These deities, translated from cuneiform as the sons of Anu, had been named the Anunnaki, the oldest gods for which we have written records, a record of a cult devoted to divine entities. These new parts of the Epic of Gilgamesh spoke of some of the most important among them. It became clear that the most powerful deity in Sumerian mythology was Anu, the personification of the sky and bearer of infinite wisdom. A god who fell in love with Ki, the goddess of the earth. And together they had offspring, the Anunnaki. A word that in its deepest sense referred to the children of heaven and earth. The Sumerian texts did not specify how many Anunnaki existed, but they emphasized the belief that they descended from the heavens to determine the destiny of humankind. These deities split the world in two, separating the sky from the earth so that humans could live upon it, and Father Anu could rule the heavens. The entire focus of the expedition shifted toward the cult of these deities. The Anunnaki, at least according to the written records, were the oldest gods in history, the seed of religion, in a way, sprouted with them. They had to discover everything they could about the children of heaven and earth. Weeks later, in the very library of Ashurbanipal, they discovered 7 new tablets that told the tale known as the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth. That text spoke of a god named Marduk, one of the Anunnaki described in the epic. A being who took the blood of the spirit Kingu and mixed it with clay in order to create the first humans. From that story, it could be interpreted that the Sumerians believed the Anunnaki created the model of mankind. A story that would later be echoed in the Bible. In the myth of Adam and Eve, the cornerstone of the Christian religion, in the dawn of time, there ruled in Uruk a man who was no mere man, Gilgamesh. 2/3 god and 1/3 mortal, stood as the mightiest king the winds of the desert had ever beheld. His strength was unmatched, his wisdom clouded by pride. And under his rule, the people cried out, for his tyranny pressed upon every stone he ordered raised, every maiden he claimed, every soul he bent to his will. The gods, moved by pity for humankind, wove a plan to create his equal, a wild mirror to challenge the king. And so, from the heart of the earth, Enkidu was born, hair-covered, drinking beside the beasts, knowing no word, no law, no city. He was nature incarnate, but fate would not let him stay in the wilderness. Destiny pulled him toward the gates of Uruk. A sacred courtesan was sent to tame the wild man with softness and whispered truths. For 6 days and 7 nights, Enkidu was initiated into the world of humans. And when he opened his eyes to this new realm, the animals fled from him. He was no longer beast, no longer free. Led by the woman, he entered the city of Gilgamesh. And there, the inevitable collided. Two titans, one of stone, the other of force, clashed at the temple gates. The earth trembled beneath their fury, but no victor emerged. Only mutual respect forged in the fire of combat. From that storm, a bond was born. Gilgamesh and Enkidu brothers in spirit sealed. An alliance that would defy the heavens. With their bond unbreakable, Gilgamesh heard a deeper calling. Gilgamesh, he proposed a quest that would shake the pillars of the world. To journey to the sacred Cedar Forest, realm of the gods, and face the monstrous guardian. Humbaba, servant of Enkidu, shaken, knew the power of that being. He knew this was no task for mortals, but Gilgamesh's will was iron. They gathered weapons forged by the finest smiths. They offered prayers to Shamash, the sun god, and called for blessings to guide them. The people wept as they departed, knowing they marched into the impossible. And so the two heroes, one born of sky, one born of earth, set forth into the unknown, toward the dark heart of the forest, where death waited and the gods watched. Through blazing sun and sleepless nights, Gilgamesh and Enkidu marched across the endless plains. Their feet broke the silence of forgotten lands, their hearts beating with purpose. Yet even heroes feel fear. Each night, dreams tormented Gilgamesh, visions of cosmic beasts, falling mountains, divine voices. But Enkidu, wise in the ways of omens, calmed him. These are not warnings, he said. They are signs of victory. The sun god Shamash lit their path, while the shadows of the Cedar Forest crept ever closer. The air thickened. The scent of sacred trees whispered of the danger to come. And at last, they stood before the gates of the forest. Before them, Humbaba, guardian of the realm of gods, waited with breath of flame and eyes of death. The trees groaned under the weight of eternity. Birds fell silent. The world held its breath. Then battle erupted. Gilgamesh and Enkidu faced Humbaba, whose voice was thunder and whose stare froze the soul. He summoned storms in flame, his roar splitting the sky. The Shamash, honoring their courage, unleashed 13 winds to trap the beast. With their enemy pinned, the heroes struck. Blades flashed, blood spilled, the forest trembled. And with one final cry, Humbaba fell. The guardian of the gods was no more. But in his final breath, he begged for mercy. He cursed them, for they had defied the divine, and the trees wept. The forest had lost its protector, and the gods were watching. Their return was triumphant. Uruk rejoiced. The king and his brother had slain the monster. Gilgamesh's name echoed like thunder across the land, and from the heavens, A goddess turned her gaze toward him. Ishtar, queen of love and war, descended in splendor. She offered him the cosmos, kingship, power, divine favor. But Gilgamesh refused. He would not be a toy of the gods. He scorned her offer with bitter words. Humiliated, Ishtar ascended to the heavens in fury. There, she begged her father Anu for vengeance. And from the celestial vaults came the punishment, the bull of heaven. It descended upon Uruk with fire and rage. Earth split, men perished. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu fought side by side. Together, they struck down the beast. Together, they defied a god. But such boldness has a price. The gods gathered. A judgment was made. Blood had been spilled in heaven's name. And Enkidu would be the one to pay the price. The sky darkened. Enkidu's dreams grew heavy and strange. He saw the gods seated in judgment, their eyes cold as stone. Because he had slain Humbaba, because he had helped kill the bull of heaven, the verdict was passed. Enkidu must die. His body, once as strong as a lion's, began to weaken. He cursed the hunter who led him to civilization. He cursed the temple woman who tamed his wild soul. But a voice from the heavens stopped him, reminding him that without them, he would never have known friendship, never have walked beside a king. And in that moment, regret gave way to tears. Enkidu lay dying, cradled by Gilgamesh. The mighty warrior wept. For the first time in his life, he faced something he could not conquer. Death. The wild man, the brother of his soul, slipped into silence, and the world was forever changed. The halls of Uruk grew quiet. The laughter faded. Gilgamesh walked alone. He built a great statue to honor Enkidu, adorned with gold and lapis lazuli. He summoned the craftsmen, the weavers, the musicians. Uruk mourned, but the king's grief could not be contained within walls. He roamed the fields where they had fought. He spoke to the rivers, the trees, the stones. Everywhere he went, he heard only the echo of his friend's voice. And then, a deeper fear took root. If Enkidu could die, so could he. And so Gilgamesh, the mighty king, the builder of Uruk, cast aside his crown. He donned animal skins, he left the city, and with wild eyes and trembling hands, he began a journey to defy death itself. Across scorched deserts and forgotten mountains, Gilgamesh wandered. He sought Utnapishtim, the man who survived the great flood, the one granted eternal life by the gods. Where is he? He cried to the winds. No man may find him, the sages said. But Gilgamesh pressed on. Days bled into nights. His skin burned. His heart grew hollow. He He crossed vast wastelands no man had dared walk. And there, at the edge of the world, he came upon a mountain no light could pierce. The twin peaks, guarded by scorpion men whose gaze could kill. They stared at the ragged king and saw a soul burning with desperation, and they let him pass. Gilgamesh entered the tunnel-law passage beneath the world, where the sun travels in darkness, 12 leagues of black silence. 12 leagues of madness. But at last, he emerged into the Garden of the Gods, a place where jewels hung from trees like fruit, and the air shimmered with divine perfume. And there, he found Siduri, the celestial alewife. She warned him, no man escapes death. Even the greatest fall. Accept life. Cherish what you have. But Gilgamesh would not turn back. His eyes held no peace. Only a single question. How do I live forever? Gilgamesh, worn and weathered, wandered still. His feet bloodied, his soul cracked, but his fire had not dimmed. He sought the path to Utnapishtim, the immortal man. And Siduri, the divine alewife, pointed him toward Urshanabi, the ferryman of the gods. Urshanabi guarded the waters of death-black waves no mortal could touch. But Gilgamesh, desperate, destroyed the sacred stones aboard the boat. And for his recklessness, he was punished. He would now have to cut 300 poles, each to push the boat forward, never letting the water touch his skin. And so they sailed across that cursed sea, through silence, through stars, toward the unknown edge of the world. And there, in the place where no man walks, Gilgamesh found him. Utnapishtim was found, the one who had survived the wrath of the gods. Gilgamesh fell to his knees. I have walked through death and darkness. Tell me how to escape it. But Utnapishtim only shook his head. There is no permanence. Even the gods weep. And then the ancient man spoke. He told Gilgamesh the tale of the great flood, how the gods, angered by the clamor of men, sought to erase them. But Ea, the whispering god, warned Utnapishtim in secret. Build an ark, he said. Preserve life. Utnapishtim. Obey. He built the vessel. He gathered the seed of every living thing. And the storm came. 7 days of fury. The world drowned. The mountains vanished beneath waves. And then silence. When the waters receded, the ark came to rest on a mountaintop. Utnapishtim released the birds to find dry land. And when the dove did not return, he knew the earth was whole again. For this, the gods granted him and his wife eternal life, but they would never offer it again. Gilgamesh listened, then begged once more. I have faced death. with shadows, let me live. Utnapishtim moved, offered him a chance. There is a plant that grows at the bottom of the sea. It will grant youth. Find it, but beware it. It is not easily kept. Gilgamesh tied stones to his feet and dove into the abyss. He found the plant, the flower of everlasting life. He rose triumphant. But on his journey home, he stopped to rest. And as he slept, a serpent crept near. It smelled the plant and stole it, slithering away into the grass, shedding its skin. Immortality was lost. Gilgamesh awoke and wept. His journey had ended in dust. He had fought the gods and learned he was human. Returned to Uruk, Gilgamesh walked its walls, not as a god, not as a king, but as a man who had seen the limits of life. He gazed at the great towers, the shining gates, the people moving like stars across the earth. And he understood. Immortality was not in the body. It was in legacy, in memory, and the stories told long after bones turned to ash. The brother he had lost, the glories he had chased, the tears he had shed, all of it would live forever in words carved into stone. And so,